Can you take a guess as to how many episodes of SpongeBob contain the Flying Dutchman? 16! Yep, that's it. Even with this relatively small episode count, the Flying Dutchman sticks out in our minds as one of the most memorable SpongeBob recurring characters. Today, we're going to be ranking every Flying Dutchman episode based on how well the character was used within that episode's story. To be clear, this isn't a ranking of these episodes specifically, it's a ranking of how well the character was used in these episodes. Without further ado, let's begin with what I think is the worst Flying Dutchman episode. Number 16, SpongeBob SquarePants vs. The Big One. SpongeBob SquarePants vs. The Big One was a double-length special released in Season 6. I didn't even remember that the Flying Dutchman was in this episode, but it turns out he is. This special suffered from one of the most major problems any story could. The episode lacked deeper themes and a character arc, and consisted of nothing more than just a bunch of things happening to the characters with a vague surfer ocean theme. Now, the deeper problems with this special are a subject for another video. I'm just gonna focus on how the Flying Dutchman was so out of place here. So, while the A plot sees SpongeBob, Patrick, and Squidward on the main surfing-related adventure, there are also these B and C plots of Krabs and Sandy who also got stranded in the ocean but ended up in different places from where the A plot takes place. Mr. Krabs ends up stranded in the middle of the ocean and does this Castaway parody with his cash register acting as the Wilson. It's fine, I guess. It's one of those do the exact same thing the movie you're parodying did, but slap on your own character kinds of parodies that doesn't add anything new to the concept. Anyway, at some point, the cash register cash holder thingy pops out and hits the Flying Dutchman in the head, which makes him drop his groceries. So, to this episode's credit, that's pretty funny. A ghost who sometimes does normal stuff like buy groceries? Yeah, that works. What doesn't work is Dutchman's place in the overall story compared to the A plot. See, the main thing that happens in this episode is the titular Big One, which is the perfect dangerous wave that appears once every 1,000 years, and is the only wave powerful enough to get our heroes back home from where they are stranded. Again, could have been a good concept if it were used to nurture actual themes and character arcs, which it doesn't. The problem with the Flying Dutchman appearing in the same episode is that he is a supernatural entity, while this big wave is also a supernatural entity, or maybe more of a science fiction one, but these supernatural entities have nothing to do with each other. The Flying Dutchman doesn't summon the wave doesn't have any power over the Flying Dutchman. It's just, here's a world where there's a ghost man and a big magical wave, and these things clash if they're in the same episode. One is a scary, spooky, otherworldly supernatural element, and the other is a universe-aligning science fiction force of nature. They give off completely different vibes, and that just throws everything off. The reason I think the Dutchman is even in this episode at all, or the reason there even are these inconsequential B and C plots, is because the writers needed to justify this being a 22-minute special because it's the Johnny Depp guest star special, which, like, if you saw the advertising for this episode back in the day, you'd know just how important that was to them. Funny thing is, if this were just a regular 11-minute episode, the Johnny Depp character would have actually had the same amount of screen time and lines, but then they wouldn't have been able to capitalize on Jack Sparrow being in the special. So the writers were grasping at straws as to how to best waste the time of the audience and went, I don't know, what if Krabs like ran into the Flying Dutchman or something and they bicker for a few minutes until he gets knocked out of the episode. It furthers no greater plot. It teaches no greater lesson. It has no greater themes. It's just a waste of time. And that's why this Flying Dutchman appearance gets bottom of the list. Number 15. Ghoul Fools. So, the Flying Dutchman doesn't appear in Ghoul Fools until towards the very end. Before we talk about Dutchman himself, let's set the stage for what is going on in this mess of an episode. So this episode begins with Patrick leading SpongeBob onto this ghost ship where they meet this ghost guy. I forgot his name. Right out of the gate, it's already drawing similarities to Shanghai, which is an episode that will appear later on this list. But something that Ghoul Fools is missing that Shanghai succeeded in is a real sense of stakes. Ghoul Fools really needed a moment like this.
That was a close one. Welcome back.
What this moment accomplishes is that SpongeBob and Patrick are now fully trapped in the situation, giving us a sense of no going back that forces us to mentally adapt to the new scenario. Ghoul Fools doesn't do a good job at making this ghost feel like a real change in authority. See, supernatural entities are often used to represent authority that is much greater than our own. Ghosts don't obey the laws of physics. They can use magic. They can take your soul. It's a power that mere mortals can't easily deal with. And we as the audience relate to that because it reminds us of great powers that we go up against in our real lives. And sure, this ghost does do a few things that threaten Sponge and Pat, like try to steal their souls and imprison them in this personal hell dimension, but these things are given very easy narrative outs, like how Sponge and Pat are told they can get their souls back if they just grab this one thing, or that Sandy just kinda has an anti-ghost machine that immediately saves Patrick, Squidward, and Krabs from the void. Flying Dutchman's role in the episode is that of a final boss antagonist who comes in and takes power over the episode's original antagonist, Mr. Ghost Guy, I think. In the story, Mr. Krabs is trying to steal the ghost's gold, only to find out that the gold actually belonged to the Flying Dutchman. So, Dutchman shows up, chases them, blows them up with an admittedly pretty creative nuclear explosion with his face on it, and then they're all just kinda in this void at the end, punished for their greed. Even though some are more deserving of punishment than others. Like, I mean, SpongeBob even wanted to give the gold back. Why is he in the void? Shouldn't he, like, go to heaven or something? Am I reading too much into this? The story itself is definitely there, but in execution, the story falls flat. The episode would have been improved if it leaned more into the greed aspect and less into the slow, meandering beginning where Patrick and SpongeBob just kind of dawdle through this ghost ship, dealing with supernatural entities that represent little story-wise other than dangerous thing. The worst thing you can do when you have supernatural elements in a story. Dutchman's presence in the episode also doesn't really tie him into any deeper theme. He's just there to raise the stakes and end the story with a bang. This would have been fine if Dutchman played into what these doubloons that everyone is fighting over actually mean. Perhaps if there was more of a backstory to how his wealth was amassed, with Dutchman and the other ghost having more of a history and dispute regarding how they got it, and having that tie into the themes of the story. Dutchman's presence and subsequent victory in getting his gold back and punishing all the characters involved in stealing it would have had more narrative weight had they done this. But the episode lacked all of these important story elements revolving around the character of the Flying Dutchman, which is why this episode ends up so low on this list, only beating out the big one because at least in this episode the Flying Dutchman fits the overall vibe. Number 14, The Curse of Bikini Bottom. The Curse of Bikini Bottom is a pretty poorly named episode, if you ask me. The curse doesn't really have anything to do with Bikini Bottom. What about The Curse of the Flying Dutchman, or Sentenced to Spectre? I don't know, those are just off the top of my head. So, in the episode, SpongeBob and Patrick are messing around with Squidward's lawnmower and shave the Dutchman's beard just before the Dutchman is going on a date. So, as punishment, SpongeBob and Patrick are turned into ghosts until the Dutchman's beard grows back. It's a classic walk a mile in my shoes kind of story, though that story doesn't really engage with SpongeBob and Patrick's established character flaw. Like, the reason they were playing with the lawnmower is because they're irresponsible. But a walk a mile in my shoes story is about teaching a character to be more empathetic to other struggles. See how the setup doesn't really work? Because of this disconnect, we don't really see SpongeBob and Patrick overcome anything meaningful. We just kind of see them wander around as ghosts, encountering different struggles like, ooh, I fell through my bed, I can't sleep because I can see through my eyelids, I can't make Krabby Patties, wah. Until Sponge and Pat are like, oh, please, Mr. Dutchman, change his bag. And Dutchman's like, no. And then they make SpongeBob be the Dutchman's beard, which I guess is a little clever, and then all is good. But the conclusion just does not mesh with the theme of the episode, if the episode was even trying to have a theme. And then to put the cherry on top of this sundae of mediocrity, it ends with the typical, haha, the Dutchman's date was actually ugly, with this big monster. Yeah, we get it. You were expecting his date to be pretty, but she's actually gross. Whatever, just put the bad SpongeBob episode in the bag. Numbers 13 through 11. Appointment TV, Sandy Help Us, and Shopping List. So these three episodes all have the Dutchman in pretty minor roles. In Appointment TV, he is one of the many characters who keep SpongeBob from watching a Lost, Mermaid Man, and Barnacle Boy episode. In Sandy Help Us, he is one of the characters who asks Sandy for help, furthering the story of that episode, which is about Sandy needing a break from serving others. And in Shopping List, the Flying Dutchman's dandruff is one of the ingredients on the fake Krabby Patty list that Mr. Krabs sent SpongeBob to get to fool Plankton. These 3 episodes are all really similar uses of the character, as he's just another one thing on the list of things the episode goes through. Of the 3, Appointment TV ranks the lowest because he just kinda appears for a second and has SpongeBob sweep his ship. Not very ghostly if you ask me. Sandy Help Us ranks in the middle since he at least has some dialogue, but his relationship to Sandy is a little lacking. And the best use of the 3 is Shopping List, where him being a ghost is important to his role in the episode and adds a level of magic to the ingredients they are gathering. Number 10. Plankton the Ghost. Plankton the Ghost is one of those typical Plankton becomes X thing to get the Krabby Patty secret formula episodes. In this one, he becomes a ghost, but he can't pick up the formula because he's a ghost. You get it. The Flying Dutchman plays the role of mentor in this episode. The only time on this list he really takes on such a role, and with Plankton of all characters. I think this is really their only major pairing in the whole series. So Dutchman teaches Plankton how to be a ghost because if you're good at being a ghost, you can pick stuff up. I kinda don't buy this as a rule of ghosts. Like, sure, the episode explains that that's the rule. You know what they say, tell, don't show. And like, I kinda get it. If you get good at haunting people, then you can gain the ability to manipulate real objects, which you can use to better haunt people. But that explanation, the one I just said, is not said in the episode. I made that up. Isn't that better? They just say, oh, being good at ghosts lets you pick stuff up. And I think the premise is just a tad weak if it relies on me as the audience member to come up with this vital reason as to why your universe's supernatural rules work this way. Another thing that the episode lacks is a narratively strong motivation for why the Dutchman is even helping Plankton. Like, sure, you can kind of see that he teaches Plankton for the love of the game of scaring or because he enjoys seeing Plankton fail, and those are motivations, but that motivation doesn't tell us anything deeper about the character or reinforce the themes of the episode, so I find it hollow. I feel this lack of a deeper motivation is all the more worse when you consider that the Plankton formula motivation didn't even need to take much time to establish because it's a recurring character motivation. So by virtue of it being a Plankton formula episode, they could have put a lot more focus on giving Dutchman a motivation that was unique to this episode. But they decided not to take that opportunity. And to make it even worse, at the end of the episode, Dutchman takes over Plankton's body because it's been so long since he's inhabited a living vessel. That's a perfect ghost trope that reinforces the value of human life, or single-celled organism life in the case of Plankton. But Dutchman doesn't even know he wants to take over Plankton's body until he sees it at the end of the episode during Plankton's funeral. It's not like it's his motivation throughout the entire narrative. All the writers had to do was 1. Have Plankton put his body in some kind of ghost-proof casket. 2. Have Dutchman bargain with Plankton, saying he'll only help him learn to be a ghost in exchange for his body. And then 3. When Plankton gets fed up trying to get the formula and gives up, he finds that Karen opened his casket for the funeral, allowing the Dutchman to get in, and then having the rest of the episode play out the same, where the townspeople step on Plankton and Dutchman's body, which makes the Dutchman say, "But I'd rather be a dead me than an alive you," completing their respective character arcs where they appreciate being themselves. Again, this episode is at least good for having those character arcs at all, but if you just had these stronger character motivations along with that better reason for why skilled ghosts can pick up objects I talked about earlier, the episode would have been 10 times better. And then on top of that, if you wrote some better jokes, it would have been 100 times better. Number 9. Money Talks. Money Talks is unique in the sense that I think it's the Flying Dutchman episode where he is most like the devil. So in the episode, Mr. Krabs suddenly has a desire to talk to money, which is a deeper manifestation of his obsession with money and a fun play on the phrase money talks. It's a careful what you wish for kind of narrative. After Krabs sells his soul to the Flying Dutchman to talk to money, he finds that he actually hates talking to money because it keeps asking him to spend it. I wonder if this is like a commentary on how ultra wealthy people hoard wealth and how a healthy economy is one where the wealth actually circulates, which is why the money wants to be spent. I don't know. SpongeBob has been pretty anti-capitalist in the past. I could see that being intentional. So the Dutchman's role is to represent the supernatural element that drives the story, and as the story goes on, he shows up to teach Mr. Krabs that there's no going back once you wish for something. I like the ending where it's revealed Krabs sold his soul to a bunch of different ghosts in SpongeBob, so the episode just kind of ends on this no one wins kind of feeling. Number 8. Squidward the Unfriendly Ghost. I almost didn't include Squidward the Unfriendly Ghost in this video, as Dutchman almost has a cameo appearance here. And there are plenty of cameo appearances that I don't consider Dutchman episodes due to them being so inconsequential to the plot. However, I decided to include this episode because 1, the Flying Dutchman is important to the plot, and 2, this is the very first time the Flying Dutchman is ever mentioned in the show. So in the episode, SpongeBob and Patrick think they murdered Squidward, and the real Squidward acts like a ghost and bullies SpongeBob and Patrick, with the lesson of the episode being, don't do that. So SpongeBob and Patrick find a book about the Flying Dutchman that states that he haunts the ocean because his body was never put to rest, which motivates them to try and bury Squidward, raising the stakes of the plot and reversing the previously established power dynamic. Of course, I can't rank this too high on the list, not because this isn't a good episode, it certainly is, it's an absolute classic, but I can't rank it too high because Dutchman plays a very small role, and he doesn't even have any dialogue and we don't see any of his personality. Also, did anyone else find it odd that in the book, when they look at the page that's supposed to be his body being used as a window display, the body has that same green shade that the ghost form has? Like, I don't think the Dutchman's physical body was supposed to glow green while he was alive. I think that's a ghost thing. Perhaps like they made so much of the episode already and the censors were like, guys, you can't show a dead body as a window display. What's wrong with you? And they're like, okay, what if we make it green? And the censors are like, great, that's equally morbid, but also really confusing. Gotta love cartoon censors. Number 7. Ghost Host. In Ghost Host, the Flying Dutchman is actually the protagonist of the episode. His character arc revolves around him losing confidence in himself as being scary, when, after living with SpongeBob for a while as he waits for his ship to be repaired, SpongeBob stops being afraid of him. It's a story that we can all relate to by simply replacing being scary with anything that we've ever felt insecure about in our own lives. Another element of Ghost Host that is enjoyable is the presentation of something like scaring and tormenting others as like a day job. While this trope is used often in regards to monsters scaring people, Monsters Inc. did it best, the reason it's used often is because it does work really well. Since a supernatural creature scaring someone is such a visceral concept, it stands out more in our minds and holds our attention. And once that attention is held, the story can thrive. Number 6. Your Shoes Untied. Your Shoes Untied is an episode of SpongeBob that is all about teaching kids to tie their shoes, which, by the way, speaking as someone who was 2 years old when this episode aired and watched the episode before learning to tie my own shoes, let me say that the song at the end does not properly teach the uninitiated how to tie their shoes at all. Though I suppose it is at least effective in getting kids to ask their parents to help them, which is exactly what the episode did for me. Anyway, despite being an episode that is about teaching one of our earliest childhood skills, the story itself is still a solid and relatable narrative about not being able to get help doing something that should be basic knowledge. Throughout the episode, SpongeBob tries to find someone to teach him how to tie his shoes, going from someone trusted like Mr. Krabs to strangers to some more wacky, desperate asks, ending off with a visit from the Flying Dutchman. Dutchman's presence in the episode succeeds because, as a supernatural entity, he represents authority and wisdom beyond our mortal scope. The fact that even an entity as powerful as the Flying Dutchman can't help SpongeBob makes it all the more meaningful that it's Gary, who SpongeBob is closest to, who helps him tie his shoes, teaching the lesson that in order to learn something basic, you should ask the people closest to you. And the Flying Dutchman being useless is an important part of that lesson. Number 5. Scaredy Pants. The very first physical appearance and lines of dialogue from the Flying Dutchman take place in Scaredy Pants, the show's first Halloween special, a fitting, true first entrance. While he doesn't appear until the end of the episode, the Flying Dutchman is mentioned in the first act when Krabs tells a ghost story to scare SpongeBob. While on the surface, this is meant to show the audience that SpongeBob is easily scared, it also sets the stage for who the Flying Dutchman is and what he's capable of doing, stealing souls. SpongeBob claims claims to be dressed as the Flying Dutchman even though his costume is only a sheet. The costume serves as the final insult towards the real Flying Dutchman, who is sick of people dressing as him every year, and because of SpongeBob's bad costume, he is going to steal the souls of everyone in the Krusty Krab. The Flying Dutchman in this episode represents the ultimate authority on all things scary. The episode is all about SpongeBob attempting to scare others in order to deal with the fact that they all scare him. By trying to scare others, SpongeBob takes back his social power that he lost when Mr. Krabs, Squidward, and the other townspeople constantly scare him each Halloween. When SpongeBob successfully scares all of the guests at the Krusty Krab, he finally takes some power back over them. But when the plan backfires and he's revealed as not a real ghost, the townspeople get their power back from him. That power is then immediately taken by the supernatural authority of the Flying Dutchman upon showing up and posing a real physical threat, elevating the stakes beyond simply who scares who to life and death. And when it's revealed that SpongeBob's shaved down brain is in fact so scary it makes even the Dutchman flee in terror, all of the Dutchman's scare power becomes transferred over to SpongeBob, crowning him the narrative winner and completing his character arc. Number 4. Arg. Arg is one of the earlier appearances of the Flying Dutchman. While he only physically appears at the end, his shadow looms over the narrative, with the board game they're playing in the first scene being based on the Flying Dutchman's treasure. The plot of the episode revolves around Mr. Krabs recruiting SpongeBob and Patrick as his pirate crew to go find buried treasure, with the lesson revolving around being a good leader to those who work under you. This is illustrated through Krabs treating his crew poorly, not being honest with them about their treasure hunt being nothing more than the game board they were playing earlier, and not being willing to share the buried treasure. When Krabs and SpongeBob and Patrick are fighting over the treasure chest, it wakes the Flying Dutchman, who runs down to ask who dug up the treasure, to which Krabs immediately blames SpongeBob and Patrick, only for that blame to backfire when the Dutchman actually thanks them for digging it up, saying it saved him a lot of digging. The reason this classic case of misdirection works is that it is consistent with the moral lesson of the episode. SpongeBob and Patrick were a loyal crew and were willing to share the riches of their adventure, so they are rewarded with Mr. Krabs treated them poorly, so he is rewarded with a plastic, fake treasure chest, symbolizing how he's no real captain. In this episode, the Dutchman serves one of my personal favorite storytelling uses for a supernatural character, a moral arbiter. In our own world, we are not governed by any known supernatural entity that tells us right from wrong, even if lots of us want to believe that we are. But we really only have other human beings to learn from. But the idea of morality, the idea of doing the right thing, of being a good person, are things that are so important to us, despite being inexplicable in their goodness beyond the way it makes us feel, that we create rules beyond the natural world we can observe to explain why goodness should govern the universe. Now look, I plenty enjoyed depictions of the Flying Dutchman where he's an authority on all things scary, or when the idea of being a scary ghost is treated like a day job, but this, a supernatural entity literally coming down and saying, you did the right thing and you did the wrong thing, to tie together the lesson of a narrative about the dangers of power imbalance, now that is satisfying to watch. Number 3. The Legend of Bikini Bottom. The Legend of Bikini Bottom is the other SpongeBob Halloween special. Actually, there's 3, but the third one doesn't have Dutchman in it, so it's not on this list. But I did talk about it in my How SpongeBob Writes Halloween episodes video, link in the description. And if you've seen that video, you'll already know that I ranked Bikini Bottom as the top Halloween episode. While I do really adore Legends of Bikini Bottom for its stunning stop-motion animation, its character arc revolving around bravering, and all-around peak Halloween aesthetic, the opening of the episode is a bit slow and definitely spends a lot more time than needed on some of the earlier scenes with Sandy, Mr. Krabs, and Plankton's respective spooky presentation. This probably is the case because the writers usually aren't used to creating 11-minute episodes, and they might struggle a bit when needing to extend the length, and I can give a few slow meandering scenes a pass for that. It's not like the big one that straight up wasted my time for 20 minutes. But even though the opening is just okay, the episode completely shifts from good to great once the Flying Dutchman appears. First off, I really gotta praise the art direction for making a ghost look good as a stop-motion puppet. That must have been incredibly difficult, since ghosts are expected to be very flowy while stop-motion is inherently rigid. This fluidity of the Flying Dutchman compared to the relative rigidity of every other character serves his role in the story as the supernatural authority on all things scary. The lesson of the episode revolves around overcoming the fears that one might feel around Halloween without making making yourself completely numb and oblivious to actual real scary things. SpongeBob's character flaw is that he's too cowardly to enjoy Halloween, and at first his solution is to just act like everything scary is funny, which works just fine with the normal scary stuff created by Sandy, Mr. Krabs, and Plankton, but once the Flying Dutchman, something that should legitimately be feared, starts stealing the souls of SpongeBob's friends, he learns that there is a balance to be struck. Not too cowardly, but not too ignorant either. Similar to Scaredy Pants, the Dutchman is defeated when he finds that SpongeBob is actually the scariest thing around. But unlike Scaredy Pants, this is accomplished by the Flying Dutchman entering SpongeBob's brain and encountering more abstract and absurd fears. Due to the Flying Dutchman's presence as the antagonist of the episode, how he serves the overall themes and lesson of the episode, and how much he elevates this Halloween special, this is truly one of the best Flying Dutchman appearances. Number 2. Shanghai. This is the first Flying Dutchman episode that really prominently featured the character. Every Flying Dutchman appearance before, even ones that were integral to the plot, only had him appear in like one scene at most. In this episode, he completely dominates the plot. I would even argue that he's the protagonist of the episode, as it seems that he goes through the most change and learns the episode's lesson, as opposed to SpongeBob, Patrick, and Squidward, who remain pretty static throughout the story. If you look at the episode through this lens, the lesson of the episode is about what happens if you try to take power over others and how they will usually fail you and betray you when you force them to do your bidding. Like I said earlier when I was criticizing Ghoul Fools, this episode really succeeds in its sense of no going back once the trio are subjected to the Dutchman's curse of joining his ghostly crew. Illustrated by SpongeBob and Patrick jumping off the ship multiple times only to land right back on it. Not only is this hilarious with all the different welcome back line deliveries, but this moment sets the foundation of the episode's stakes. Now we know that no matter what they do, they'll always end up magically tethered to this ship. And this really gives us a sense of being trapped. And then, once this power imbalance is set, the narrative then punishes the Dutchman with SpongeBob and Patrick's incompetence, with them damaging his ship and royally screwing up all his ghostly exploits. The power the Dutchman has, as established by the ship jumping scene, has now been stripped of him when the very people he took power over are still unable to serve his needs. Then, in one quick line, the stakes of the final scene are set.
Actually, I'm just gonna eat you. See you at dinner.
And just like that, the Dutchman is in power again, but with the introduction of a hilariously absurd plot device, the dining sock that magically allows the Dutchman to eat, it gives a bit of power back to SpongeBob and Patrick, leading to just about equal power balance that drives the episode's multiple endings. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention, this episode has multiple endings. There was like this totally not rigged voting system where you could vote on which of the three characters gets to use the wish that Dutchman gave them in exchange for his dining sock. Of the three alternate endings, SpongeBob's is narratively the strongest and was the one that won the voting. With Patrick and Squidward's wishes, it boils down to them just wishing for something that immediately backfires, with Patrick wishing for gum, and Squidward wishing he'd never met SpongeBob and Patrick, with the joke being that it didn't change any of the past, and SpongeBob and Patrick just like, oh hi, I don't think we've met. The reason SpongeBob's ending works the best is not only because it's the most creative ending, with SpongeBob wishing the Dutchman was a vegetarian so he wouldn't eat them, with the Dutchman then turning them all into fruit so he can eat them within that new rule set, but it's also the most narratively sound ending because it fits into the lesson I was talking about earlier, about how taking power over others always backfires. In the Patrick and Squidward endings, the Dutchman actually does eat them, and it shows this disturbing shot. But in the SpongeBob vegetarian ending, the fruit versions of our Dutchman victims flee and get chased around this ghostly hippie van. We don't see what happens next, and the episode ends in this literal circle of Dutchman chasing his victims, reinforcing the episode's themes and keeping the power dynamic balanced. Another thing that makes this a peak Dutchman episode is how well he works as a straight man. Seeing this otherworldly powerful force just get constantly pushed around by these mortals is so satisfying. And the way the Dutchman as a character reacts to these situations are what make this one of the top Dutchman episodes out there. But there's one other episode that I truly think is the best Flying Dutchman episode ever. Number 1. Born Again Crabs. I'm surprised that I put Born Again Crabs at the top of this list, since the Flying Dutchman isn't as much of the focus of the episode, and his role is much more unorthodox than usual. But I think the fact that he is used in such a creative and unique way, combined with the fact that this is definitely the funniest episode on this list, I think this deserves the title of Best Flying Dutchman Episode. And I mean, remember all that stuff I said earlier when I talked about Arg, about the Dutchman being this supernatural arbiter of justice? He does that even more in this episode. The protagonist of this episode is Mr. Krabs, and the episode directly confronts Krabs' most prominent character flaw, his greed. Episodes that put Mr. Krabs' greed in the spotlight and punish him for it are inherently satisfying to the audience. Seeing rich people get punished for being greedy is always fun to watch because it unfortunately happens oh so rarely in real life. The best way to describe the role of the Flying Dutchman in this episode is to say that he's kind of like the spirits that visit Ebenezer Scrooge in A Christmas Carol. After Krabs eats a rancid Krabby Patty to try and prove that he can save 12 cents selling rotten food, he ends up in the hospital. The Flying Dutchman shows up almost like an angel of death and informs Krabs that he'll be punished for eternity in Davy Jones's locker, depicted here as a literal locker filled with dirty gym socks. Pretty funny. But again, similar to Scrooge in Christmas Carol, Krabs is given a second chance to be generous, which he does. After we see a big change in Krabs' behavior, it's revealed that he just thinks that none of this was real and it was all a dream. But once he realizes this is real life, he reveals his true nature, which is that he just can't resist being the cheapskate he is. Then Dutchman gives Krabs the ultimate test, SpongeBob's soul for all the money in his pocket, which amounts to 62 cents. And Krabs takes the money without hesitation. It is after this moment that Krabs finally learns his lesson. And the reason I think I and many others find this scene effective is just how too late the moment feels when Krabs finally realizes all he's done wrong. So many stories will have their characters learn their lesson before making such a fatal mistake, and in many of those stories that works just fine. But the lesson shines so well in this scene because of just how unabashedly greedy Krabs is portrayed as a character. There's no moral dilemma, no thought put into it, just a quick, I'll take the money, and it's over, and shows us just how fast we can make such a life-ruining decision. And of course, SpongeBob does come back, but that's just because SpongeBob is so annoying the Flying Dutchman couldn't deal with him. Again, another example of, the Flying Dutchman being this regular guy, this straight man. It's perfect. It's a great way to tie it together and not, have SpongeBob literally go to hell. Using a supernatural entity like the Flying Dutchman for this scene enhances the message of how damaging greed can be. It shows us that greed is more powerful and more dangerous than an actual, real ghost. So that's my ranking of every Flying Dutchman episode. Which episodes do you think I was too hard on? Which ones weren't as good as I said they were? Let me know in the comments below. Also, make sure to check out my gaming channel where I cover the GBA port of Revenge of the Flying Dutchman. Can't get enough Dutchman, huh? Thank you so much for watching. See you next time.